Okay. So Adam and I can't see you, or at least I should speak for myself. I can't see you very well because on my laptop, I mostly just see the Google Slides. So if you have a question or a comment or feedback or whatever, drop it in the chat or just speak out. It's all good. So welcome to being here for today. If you're part of the whole series, this is sort of the natural progression. We've kind of talked about upstream prevention, this kind of state of youth mental health and health writ large for young people in Idaho. Then we talked about some deep dives into specific risk and protective factors that are important for Idaho's youth based on the surveying that we've been doing across the state. We also talked about, we're really grateful to have this amazing school leadership team on our panel because they talked about how to include this work in your sort of strategic planning of the year. And so now today we're kind of going to talk specifically about why we keep throwing around this thing, data, robust data. These are kind of weird terms, and it's so important to have this conversation. Why is data important? Why do we need to collect it well? And it's not the same as just like, oh, yeah, we collected data. We asked some questions of some kids. And so we're going to talk about that today. And I'm really grateful that you all are here with us. The learning objectives are to, by the end, we hope you can articulate important factors in robust data collection, survey use, and focus group design. We hope that you are able to be even more confident in applying data collection to your data-driven decision making for your schools. And then we also hope that you're able to consider how robust data collection can support and guide and monitor your goals for youth well-being in your school community. And so I'll start here, and I think it's important for us to kind of note that in 2021, that was the last year that the state of Idaho participated in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So this was the only statewide capture of data around young people's health experiences, their well-being experiences, and also the factors that might have led to those experiences. This is a national survey, so it's done in states across the country, and unfortunately, we stopped participating in 2021. And so that made it so that the only data we now collect in this state is what we call outcome data. So that means emergency department visits, mental health visits, or deaths by suicide. And you all know that that is way too late to do anything about. And it's really hard when you just have really heavy, hard outcome data and no kind of reason or rationale or pathway or navigational tool for how to fix the problem. And so this is unacceptable on a lot of levels. And so I just want to kind of level set that data collection is super important for schools, for sure, but it's also super important for youth health writ large. And in the state of Idaho, we have a very bird underdeveloped, I will say, system for data collection for young people. And so we have a really poor understanding of what young people actually need, what they're actually struggling with, and most importantly, how we can meet those needs. And so there are, and they are valid, there are many fears and concerns around surveying youth. And I am with you all. Like, I have been a youth professional for a long, long time, and I am extremely worried about bad outcomes for youth. That's why I do this work. And so I understand that people who are worried about asking particularly sensitive questions or hard things on a survey, I understand those fears and concerns. However, not knowing, trying to solve problems that we don't understand in a thorough way is much more dangerous. And in fact, there are no reported harms for any of the data that's been collected on the Youth Risk Behavior Survey or the Idaho Youth Wellbeing Survey. And so I just want to say it's valid for you to have fears and concerns and to worry about the sensitive nature of some of these questions. However, if we only know the number of young people who die by suicide, but not the risk and protective factors, not the reasons why that might be happening, or where that's happening more, or in what population, then we really are trying to solve an enormous problem blind, which isn't really helpful to us. And so today, after that lovely level setting, we're going to talk about robust data collection.
So, friends, I think we all agree we live in a world where we're surrounded by data, and some of it's really good, some of it's less reliable. And so, we're going to look at kind of what elements are essential that um, separates usable data from just noise. Um, some of the things that I think are essential for robust data to exist are high response rates. When we work with communities for youth, we set our bar at 60% or higher of the total student population participating. Response rates matter because it determines whose voices we're actually hearing. Low response rates tend to capture extremes, students or families who are either really happy or really frustrated with your system. But when you get to that higher response rate, it ensures that we hear from, the quieter, invisible, or marginalized groups and make sure that it's not just a trend among few people, but it's an indication of how the whole system is doing. Um, when we think about validity and measurement, I think we all would agree that good data starts with good questions. If the survey questions aren't scientifically designed, if they're vague, if they're misleading, it leads to garbage in, kind of garbage out information. Validity protects us from overreaching or misdiagnosing the problem. And strong decisions require strong instruments. We have to have good data and valid and reliable measurements if we're going to set our actions to respond to this data. It's really important to get longitudinal consistency. I think you need to stop and think what's happening in this moment. Anytime we give a survey and students respond, it's one snapshot in time, and 2 weeks later, conditions could be drastically different in your community or your school. And so you need that longitude to really understand, is this an ongoing trend or something that just kind of happened in the moment? Measuring the same thing in the same way over time allows us to distinguish, how deep of a systemic issue is this and who is it affecting and why. Um, Consistency over time is what turns data really into insight into your system. And then the last element is we really want this measurement tool to be multidimensional, to really focus on the whole child. Grades alone don't tell us whether students are connected, safe, supported. We want to know really every element of how our students are succeeding or how they're being challenged. Robust data should include social emotional health, attendance, belonging, things that we traditionally haven't reported at parent-teacher conferences or grade reports. It's that whole child, the complete picture. Can we go to the next slide? And so this is really why robust data collection matters. Um, we need to move from anecdotes to evidence, and we need to ground our response to data in evidence. We all hear things like kids seem more anxious, kids seem depressed, kids seem stressed. And that matters, but it doesn't move systems. What moves systems is being able to ground it in data and actually give a meaningful response. 35% of our sophomores respond high anxiety. That becomes a much more actionable trend. It becomes easier to secure resources. Um, Anecdotes start conversations. Data drives decisions, is what I would leave you with on that. We need to capture the full picture. Robust data isn't just about identifying problems, it's also measures what's working. And you need to be able in today's climate to really celebrate what's working. I think as public education, we sometimes do a poor job of telling our story and celebrating our successes. And when we're fighting in a climate for every single dollar, you really need to be able to ground in data. What are you doing that's working and be able to have some sort of a data measurement point to prove that, to continue to get resources to support what you're doing. Um, Robust data gives you predictive power. When we measure risk and protective factors in real time, we can intervene earlier. That's the difference between primary prevention and crisis response, as Megan said. Good data lets us act before students reach a breaking point. And then, like I just mentioned, the grants and funding. Most of us in Idaho don't have the necessary resources to respond the way we want on our own. We have to go out and look for those opportunities. And there are quite a bit of opportunities right now. But in order to accurately state your case and to receive that funding, you really need to be grounded in good, robust data. Robust data is your leverage. And so, in closing, robust data helps us align with what we say we value and what we actually fund and prioritize.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Great job, Adam. I love it. Um, it's so nice when someone else in the room is talking about the importance of robust data collection. So sorry for my emotions about that. Improving the root causes, I just want to center us like this is the ultimate goal, right? We are trying to look at the things happening in each one of these domains and how they relate to youth outcomes. And so, why are surveys important to that? So, why are we even talking about data? This is an upstream prevention echo, and it's if I'm just going to repeat some key ideas. If we don't know what the issues are, we can't address them. And this, there's such a good anecdote here or a story of a school that was thinking vaping was their major problem, and when we looked at the data, only 6% of their population were vaping, but 66% of their population were struggling with mental health concerns. And so just that the window that data can open to things that might be in your blind spots, it also provides a shared understanding so that when we share this data out across our school leaders, across our staff, across the parents and community members around us, across the young people themselves, we all kind of have a same starting point that we can work from together. It also, data helps us check our work. So we all are good intentions. We're all doing things that, of course, we believe are going to do the right thing and be the right thing for young people. And data allows us, if we're collecting it on an annual basis, it allows us to see are the things that we're doing actually moving the needle in the way that we want it to. And then finally, it helps us focus. So many of us come to this with good intentions from lots of different perspectives and life experiences. And the data helps us all keep our focus on what's most important, which is what are young people experiencing and what do they need? The Idaho Youth Wellbeing Survey, we talked about, or Adam talked about sort of the multidimensional nature of robust data collection, right? So we're not just doing a 10-question survey about tobacco use because then we don't know how tobacco use relates to depression or relates to academic outcomes. And so the Idaho Youth Wellbeing Survey collects information on health perceptions, behaviors, and outcomes like substance use, chronic absences, mental health, physical health, but it also collects those things on those risk and protective factors that drive upstream prevention across those different domains. So at the end of your schools participating in the Idaho Youth Wellbeing Survey, you get a data summary report. These are just pictures that show you a little bit about what it looks like, and then you get a predictive model. And what that is able to do, because of that multidimensional capture of data, it's able to show you the relationships in your own school population across factors that matter. So, for instance, if you're really interested in depression, it's going to show you what are the things in your school population that are driving that depression in your population. So I'm just going to do a quick little kind of sample dive into what it looks like when you have robust data collection. So a lot of us are used to this type of data. So this is what we would call like outcome data. This is just capturing in this community B population how many of their young people were at a moderate to severe level of depression. So in this particular community, it was 27% of their population. And often this is the only data we might know, and some of our schools don't even know this. We just know kids are struggling and we don't know how big the problem is. But with just this data, this can be kind of overwhelming to schools. What do we do? How do we start? Who are the kids that are depressed, etc.? And so when we do that multidimensional data capture, we can actually kind of dig a little deeper. And so we might then look at what does that look like across grade and gender, right? And so this is that same population of young people who had about 27% over their whole population who were indicating that clinical level of depression. And now you're looking at it broken out by grade and gender. So the blue bars are the boys, the orange bars are the girls, and then it's by grade. And so this you can already see gives you a much clearer picture about what actions you might take, right? So The first picture we just had, okay, 27% of our population. Who are they? What are they? We don't know. Now we know, oh, wow, ninth grade girls are at the high 49% of ninth grade girls are indicating depression. So if we're going to think about what we might do with the data, we might say, okay, that population looks like they need a little bit more support. We also can see that across this population, girls have more, they're reporting larger depressive symptomology than others. And so that's another key thing. What are we doing for girls? Do we need to think about what's going on for girls, et cetera, in our community? And this, there's other data unpacking that we can do. So then we looked at with this school, what are the factors that are driving depression in this community? So we ran that predictive model because, again, we collected robust data with good measurement and multidimensional tools. We had over 60, well, in this particular community, we had way over 60% of their population participating. And so then what comes out of that data analysis is these four factors being the main drivers of that depression in their community. And so then we can go even further. I know some of you are like, oh my gosh, you are getting intense, but I love this stuff. I feel when I teach stats to my students, I tell them it's really like being a detective, right? You're kind of following the clues and figuring it out. And so we found out in this community, here's the main factors. So then we want to kind of unpack those. And so what we did is we looked at social isolation, since it's a driver of depression, across race. And so you can see if we know that young people are some of our young people are depressed in this community, and we know that social isolation is a main driver of that, we want to look at how does that look across subgroups, again, to help us figure out how do we navigate where we put our resources and our attention. And so you can see in this community, white young people are less socially isolated than some of our young people identifying in minority groups. And we talked a little bit about that with Janelle Stouffer last time. But you can see that there's elevated rates of social isolation in the Black population of young people, in Native American and Native Hawaiian folks. And so this is a way to really think about, okay, well, maybe are there special things we can be doing for these particular populations because these kids seem to be feeling more lonely in our population. We can go even further. So now we can say, okay, not only do we want to look at it by race, but we want to look at it by gender and race. And so this one is looking at, remember, we saw earlier that girls had a higher burden of depression than boys in this population. So that's why we're looking at girls specifically. And we saw that there were some race differences. And then this slide, y'all, when we talked about it with this community, is huge because what you're really seeing is overwhelmingly young Black women in this population were experiencing the highest burden of loneliness and probably driving that. And in fact, something that's not in these slides that we found out is that they just happen to have a larger population in that ninth grade for whatever reason of these young people. And so that was driving that ninth grade outcome there. And so you can see really how having this robust data where we can look at it all together, measured well, allows us to think about how can we really drill down and make change immediately for young people. So what are we doing for Black young women on this campus, right? And so that's a powerful example of how collecting robust data, making sure it's population level, so we're getting all those groups that may have, if we're just collecting 20% of our population, may not have even popped in the data. And so this can be really helpful. The next step, because I know some of you are like, oh my gosh, if she talks about statistics one more time. I also love focus groups because guess what? I'm a equal opportunity data nerd. And I love the ability to then go back into community and really build the contextualization of what we're seeing in the numbers. So it's not just enough to have like 30% are this or 70% are this. Really, it's then better to go back and have that conversation and have the different pieces of information. We do focus groups with young people, we do focus groups with teachers and staff, parents and community members to really fully understand that data point. So instead of just knowing a lot of people are stressed out, we go in and have conversations about what is stressful in this specific context. And so Another great advantage of focus groups is that it can humanize the data. So it helps us kind of understand the why, or it makes it relevant. So you might be talking to someone who's not fully bought in on caring about young people. And when you can marry the statistic of how great the problem is with the story of what young people are saying that's driving the problem, it can be a really powerful change maker for that person. It can uncover hidden or unknown variables. So I will tell you that the Idaho Youth Wellbeing Survey changes a little bit each year based on the focus groups we do with young people because they will say, gosh, we're really stressed out. And in the focus group, we find out that it's really not the stressors we were thinking about. It's really stressors around academic pressure or something else. And those conversations help lead us to being able to capture that more. It can also pre-test intervention ideas. I love this one for school populations. So a school is like, we want to do a peer-to-peer or a Hope Squad program, right? And it's so powerful and important to get a group of young people together and say, hey, here's a problem. This is the way we want to solve it. What do you think about this works for you and what doesn't work for you? And so you can really do a lot of pre-work before you jump into an intervention, especially a costly intervention, to really think about is that choice that the adults in that school community are making really the right fit for young people? And we can also do this post-intervention. So if you've just launched a Hope Squad, coming back and talking to young people about how that is working for them is a really powerful um, kind of mechanism of a focus group. The last thing is just triangulation. I think, statistics are definitely one part of the puzzle, but really feeling that whole story out and talking to different groups of people really helps us think, is this a really systemic problem or is this a very specific problem that we're seeing in our data? And so I'll just close with this. I am a little over time. Thank you for everyone for being patient. Key points are robust, well-designed, and collected data is necessary to understand and effectively respond to real-time experiences of young Idahoans. We should avoid data that only represents a small portion of the population. So if you see something and it says the response rate is 15%, you can throw that in the trash. It doesn't mean anything. We should avoid data that uses made up questions that someone was just like, I'm curious, because survey design, actually, some people get full PhDs in survey design. So it's a very specific science about how to measure particular elements of youth experience. We should also avoid data that only focuses on outcomes because that can just be overwhelming. It can be demotivating to our teams, right? Because if there's no roadmap for why that particular outcome is bad or good, it can be really challenging to teams to grapple with. And then finally, if you partner with organizations like Communities for Youth or any research analysts, public health professionals, things like that, they can make data collection a lighter lift for your school population. And so this is not just like, hey, come work with us, even though we want you to. We want you to work with anybody because there are lots of people with these skills that want to work with schools and other communities to kind of help them make that data collection and analysis a lighter lift. Because obviously, when I went on that, like, and here's another chart, and here's another chart, you as a school professional are like, oh, I do not have time to make all those charts and do all that data analysis. And so partnering with organizations can be a really key tool there. All right, it's case time, I think.
It is case time. And so transitioning, I'd like to introduce Principal Julia Graft, principal of Wood River High School. She's in her fifth year as principal of the school, and this is their third year participating in data collection with Communities for Youth. And she's volunteered to share with us a case that their school is currently grappling with as a part of this process.
Thanks, Adam, for that introduction. Julia, your case is on the screen, so why don't you go ahead and take, 10 minutes or so to kind of walk us through the case. And then for all of our participants, I can make this a little bigger. Sorry, I see some of you guys are straining there. As part of our case presentations, what we'll do is the presenter will kind of run through the case and then we'll take a few minutes to ask questions. So before we get into recommendations or any of that, we really just want to ask the school or the case presenter questions about their case to get a better understanding. And then once we feel like we have the full picture, then we'll move into recommendations after that. So Julia, whenever you are ready, go ahead and take it away. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
You'd think I'd know by now. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I do have members of my team here, so I would want them to jump in if I miss anything. This document's a little bit of a stream of consciousness, we just got our data last month for this year's. Like Adam said, we're in year 3. The first year, because it all ties together, I'm going to start with kind of our progression and what we're envisioning for next year, but can't wait to hear your feedback and questions. Our first year doing the data, we also had some crises in our community and the loss of some youth. And so based on the data and just what had happened in our community, we brought in Sources of Strength as a school program to help to do some more upstream prevention around suicide. There are 8, not 9, 8 components of Sources of Strength that we've tried to embed into our school culture. We were also going through our PBIS training with SESTA and getting our PBIS off the ground in terms of our tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 interventions that tie into some of what we were doing. And then last year, based on the data, it was clear we needed to work on our trusted adults. So our counseling staff in our district PLC have selected that as the goal that they're working towards. So we're trying to increase the number of students who identify a trusted adult in the high school. Even though the question is for just the community at large, we want to make sure our kids have someone here at the school they can turn to. So this year we started out with similar to the questions in the youth wellbeing survey, just a quick survey of our student body. And now we have a list of both who has been identified as a trusted adult, which the counseling department sent out to celebrate those folks, and a list of students who did not have anyone they identified. Our school's about 900 students. I think over 600 took that particular survey. But our data showed this year when we were going over it, we just went over it last Monday with our leadership team, and we have identified school connectedness as something we really want to be more intentional on, and a sense of belonging for our kids. Our population, we're 48% Hispanic. If you're familiar with Wayne County, we're a very unique county in that we have a lot of disparity in socioeconomic. It's very high cost of living here and a recreational place, but a lot of workers as well to support the industry here. And so we have a pretty extreme spectrum of socioeconomic and a lot of disparity there. So we want a population where our kids feel like they belong regardless of where they fall in that. Some of our data is here. We have asked for more specific data based on that, as Megan referenced. But you can kind of see a snapshot of some of the data that informed our thinking around making school connectedness and sense of belonging kind of our focus for next year. So we're in our initial brainstorming phase of how we do that. We really do. We'd love feedback actually on our trusted adult. We have some activities we want to plan going into the spring to really connect adults with students and help adults know better how to connect with kids. We want to get a kid perspective. Our counseling department's going to be interviewing kids on what makes a trusted adult and share that as kind of an inspiration for our staff. We want to do tips in our weekly emails on how to connect with kids. Dave Stewart has a program we want to explore around meaningful connections with adults that adults can kind of track. There's a lot of options out there or strategies to help with that we want to explore. On the school connectedness piece, the plan is next year as we take each of those 8 areas in the Sources of Strength and make it a focus for the month. So kids not only know what their sources of strength are, but we have activities around it. And we believe that through some of those activities, we can increase the sense of belonging and school connectedness, as well as help the mental health component. Gosh, I'm missing some stuff. So we're looking for specifically, school connectedness is such a broad category. What questions we kind of have outstanding that we're exploring as a school that I'll be presenting to parents and the rest of our staff later, and our student focus groups. What do students look for in a trusted adult? What makes a trusted adult for students? And how do we take that list of kids identified with no trusted adult and not so publicly, but pursue them and get them connected to someone in a really authentic, genuine way? How do we help students with the sense of belonging? What are some things you've seen in your schools or in the community that have helped students feel heard and seen? I think that's really important. So yeah, That's kind of an overview of what we're thinking. Like I said, we're in the really initial phases of the planning for next year. We do want to do a soft launch. We have we have a win schedule, so to speak, our advisory / wins, or what I need. We have 2 40-minute periods a week where students can sign up or be signed up for anything. And I referenced the Youth Wellbeing Initiative. We have an amazingly supportive community here. We have a group of partners who have come together, and they're creating wellness ambassadors for our community. But these are folks who may be willing to come in. We surveyed our kids of what kind of win sessions they would like for enrichment. For example, changing a tire, how to do that, or job interviews. There's a whole bunch of things that kids identify that they would like to learn about. And so these ambassadors would come in and teach our kids these sessions, and we could connect them with the community as well. That was also part of the Blaine County survey data. And we want a soft launch. Kind of how does that go when we bring people in? How do our, what are the things we need to kind of be aware of before we hard launch it next year? So those are some of our initial thoughts. Any questions or feedback? Anything else from my team, Kathleen, Vincent, or Samantha, that I may have missed?
Nope, I think you summed it up perfectly. Good job.
I think we would just love ideas from other schools of how you guys include, encourage the sense of belonging with your student body.
I have a school that jumped on this year too. I'm in Boise, Idaho, Hidden Springs Elementary, and we basically put out a survey to students. I'm happy to share it with your team if you'd like. And we had students circle pictures of people or write down people, depending on their age, who they felt connected with. And then students that didn't have more than one person, we then went in a staff meeting. Each staff member took 2 kids that they would be willing to connect with throughout the year. And that could have been a student that they maybe will have in the future. Maybe they had a sibling, or maybe they already had that student previously. And it's going really well, but it is our first year.
Thank you, Katrina. So I'd love to start, that's a really great suggestion. I'd love to start with questions. I know Julia kind of put out a couple questions that she had from folks, but I'm curious from panelists and from participants, what questions do you have before we kind of dive into those recommendations about school population or the data that they received? And I'm wondering if we could start with some of our panelists asking questions, and then we'll move into our audience members. And you can put those questions in the chat, or you can just come off of mute. Is there anybody who would like to start?
Julia, great job, and thank you for presenting your case. So, how did you, I guess my question, and it's kind of personal as well, so how did you go about, as far as what kind of a tool did you use to survey your kids? And do you have how were you able to identify, is it anonymous? Can you actually identify what student it was that would be able to show that they didn't have a connection? And same thing with demographics, knowing which demographic population may be less connected. We did something similar, but it was from a teacher perspective, identifying kids, and just wondering how the demographic part played out.
So we had 2 surveys. We used the community well-being survey every year for 3 years, but then we pulled some of those trusted adult questions from that, and I think we made a Google form of them. And Vincent, I'm going to actually put Vincent on the spot. He kind of oversaw that. But was it anonymous, Vincent? How did you break down? Did we collect demographics on the responses?
We did collect demographics. All Google form responses were linked to the students' emails. So we were able to, and then we asked also what grade level they were in. So we're able to break it down by, grade level. And then also it was a Likert scale. So we're able to kind of rate their level of trusted adult. And so the ones identified just said, no, we don't have one.
Does that answer your question, Norm?
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you.
I have, I guess, a quick question. Just as we think about, identifying students who don't necessarily have a trusted adult, I think a lot of times we start with the idea that being a trusted adult is a disposition, and we need to shift that it's kind of a professional practice. Are there things that you're doing that train staff better on how to be successful in this role as being a trusted adult?
We just had the original when we met and we're talking about this goal. The original plan was to offer PD. There is one of my counselors found a PD. I can't remember around how to be a trusted adult. And our staff meetings were doing PD rotations, and Ed Camp is next month. And so the idea was to do PD there. It has since shifted, but we're reconsidering from that conversation. It has shifted to how do we inspire people to be that way. But there was a conversation of maybe we do need to have more explicit instruction on how. And so the plan is to put tips in our weekly email, our staff bulletin email, on strategies and how to do it, and just do little snippets each week about that. So that's how we're choosing to do the PD rather than through that Ed Camp model.
I had just a thought, Julia, when you were talking about that. I think so often the people that do well with that connection piece, whether they're your lunch lady, your bus driver, a teacher, they know their own capacity and they're able to ask for support when they need it. I think it's one more thing that we've put upon educators. And I think that the best trusted adults are those that have a greater capacity and a solid support system.
Yes, for sure.
A question in the chat that I got. Can you give a definition of what it means to be a trusted adult?
Did we provide one, Benson? I don't think we provided that. It's someone the questions are around comfortable sharing. Let me see if I can pull that up so I don't misquote. Benson, do you have the questions in front of you? And did we provide? I think here they are. Outside of my parents or caregivers, I have a trusted adult at school who is around when I am in need. So someone they're willing to go to when in need, who they can share their joys and sorrows with, who provides a real source of comfort, and who cares about my feelings. So those were kind of the identifiers built in the questions. Again, that was taken from our well-being survey, so our data would match what we've been collecting.
And I'm sorry that I missed this part. Is this middle school or high
Oh,
school?
no, high school, sorry.
High school. Okay.
9-12.
Yeah, I'm curious, Alexis, from a parent perspective. You represent such a large range of parents, and I'm sorry you're just one person and I'm putting you on the spot for all parents. But I'm curious, like when you hear something like, oh, a certain amount of kids doesn't have a trusted adult, and that a school is kind of going hard on trying to build up trusted adults in their own population, like how do we get parents engaged in that?
Yes, fair question, and hard to answer for all Idaho parents. Um, it was actually my question. I just kind of shot a question over to Shannon, which was like, have we defined what a trusted adult is? And the reason I ask that in part is because right now we live in a world where there's a lot of stuff out there regarding public education and different things that are happening within public education. And so there are some phrases and words that I just think, unfortunately, on some level, we have to be really careful how we're using them. Because right now, different parts of the United States, there's a case right now somewhere where a parent suing a school over something. And so when I hear that, X number of kids don't have a trusted adult, in some measure, I think back to when I was in high school. And did I have a trusted adult in those settings? And to answer that question, I don't know that I would have had a trusted adult to share information with, but that wouldn't have been necessary for me in the 90s. Like, I don't know that I needed that. I think more for me, and I think a lot of parents might feel this way in that, does my kid just simply feel comfortable at school? Like, none of my kids, I think, at this moment feel like they have a trusted adult that they could do some of those things that Julia kind of articulated in that sentence. But I don't know that that means that kids don't feel comfortable or they don't feel connected. So I don't know, Megan, if that really answers your question.
Sure.
Um,
I think it's always helpful to like kind of understand that the interpretation of the thing. And so you're absolutely correct. A trusted adult, especially if we're talking about like with a school professional, is different from feeling connected to school, right? School
mhm,
connectedness is a larger topic about, do I feel like kind of motivated by the things I'm learning? Do I feel like it's relevant? Do I feel like people at my school writ large, not just the teachers and staff, am I connected to them, right? And so school connectedness is a much broader topic.
mhm,
But a
mhm.
key piece of that is relationships. And, I know there are lots of school counselors and developmental people on the phone. So I'm, maybe speaking to the choir, but I think there's a perception, particularly when we have good, strong families, right? So I always tell people, even if you have the perfect relationship with your child, right? There's a perception that's enough. And unfortunately, it's not enough for most teens, even the best, most well-adjusted teens. And the reason is because during the adolescent time, our brain literally seeks individuation from our parents, even if our parents are perfect beings, right? Even if we have a great relationship with our parents. And so it's really important to track and understand and provide both young people knowing that they need a trusted adult, but also trusted adults knowing they need to be that for young people. Because even in that perfect relationship, you need somebody else for that kid because just the normal healthy development is that they will seek information from someone else. And it's better if it's a trusted, safe adult. And for those of you with young kids or you're working in a elementary or middle school setting, I say help our parents, especially in those really good relationships, help our parents name that trusted adult for their kids, right? Because I understand there's some question about like parent autonomy and like, why is it the teacher that needs to be my kid's trusted adult? And it doesn't need to be that, but there does need to be a trusted, safe adult outside of that family unit. And so, that can be like an uncle or an aunt, or it could be a neighbor, or it could be a best friend, or it could be a teacher, right? And so I think it's so important that we share the importance of trusted adults and the importance of the work of, kids are in schools with a bunch of teachers and staff every day. So wouldn't it be nice if all those people were trusted, safe people? And so moving towards that. And yeah, I'm going to stop talking. I see lots of comments in the chat. So.
Yeah, I just want to read from Lori because she kind of touched on what you talked about. She said, my wife and I have specifically talked with our kids about what adults in our circles, many of whom are parents of their peers, they feel they could trust. We have also asked these adults if they're willing to be a go-to adult for our kids, making the relationship and willingness of that adult to be available to our kids, even informally, at least in my perception, increases the chance our kids will reach out if needed.
Yes, and thank you for that comment because that is a key thing that we work on both in parent circles and school circles is that we need to help kind of demystify the trusted adult. I think it's interesting when we go into communities and we ask, do people have trusted adults? And there's all this question around what does that definition mean and do kids know what that is? And so that really tells me that not all young people know they need to have one, know what it looks like, right? And so those conversations are really powerful. And as Lori evidenced, both in the family and also at the school. So part of a trusted adult strategy at a school should include overt conversations about why having a trusted adult is important and what they look like and who they are. And that could be very protective of some of those other bad outcomes.
And then a question thought from Sarah, what about increasing parent trust in schools? I read a lot of Facebook groups with moms in them, and many times the adults don't trust the adults in schools. Does that sentiment trickle down to their kids?
So important, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, this is a big, I mean, a huge problem facing public schools and schools writ large across the nation and the world. It's a big problem. It's not an Idaho problem. I want to make sure that's clear. Um, but yes, the conversations we're having in our families, in the social political conversations we have in the news, that impacts the ability for a young person to feel connected at school and to find trusted, safe adults at school. And so I do think there's always this two-pronged conversation. Schools themselves cannot solve this problem. We need to come together with communities and parents and work together to solve this problem because the lack of trust at the adult level absolutely impacts the lack of trust at kids level, and the people who pay the consequences and the prices for that are the kids. And so if parents and schools are bought into this, we need to get on this, we need to start working together towards what does this look like and how do we make it better for kids.
So I totally agree, Megan. I appreciate the comment, Sarah, that I was actually having this conversation just yesterday with Matt Todd, who is the host of the Ranch podcast, because he and I do podcast work together. And I was noting, and pardon me for making a generalization here, but I was noting that a lot of the problems right now that are happening in my community or in some of the Treasure Valley areas have a lot to do with people who have come from out of state and they brought their kind of far crazy ideology and they're bringing it into some of our school settings. And that's what we're noticing because a lot of people who have been in Idaho for a long time are saying, we love our schools, we love our teachers, we love this atmosphere. And so, but unfortunately, some of this stuff is taking place on social media, and whether it's true or not, schools are getting slammed for it. And so I heard a great presentation by Tim Sperber, who is now the superintendent of the Lewiston School District. And he really talked about the need to what Lewiston School District is doing right now via social media to build some of that trust with their community. And the premise that using a parent group to help do that can increase that connection between parent and school. So those are just some tough realities that we sit in, but I think part of it to help some parents understand that when like in the wording for surveys or talking about trusted adult, it's not stepping in between the family and the child. It's about helping the child be successful in life, and being respectful of that relationship. And I feel like the reality for us is that it's so important for us to make those specific differentiations so people understand. Otherwise, stuff pops up so that you can then have your allies in your community, those parents who are going to step in and say, actually, that's not true. That's not what I'm noticing. I mean, I had that conversation with a lawmaker last year who said, teachers, they just don't want they don't want parents in the classroom. And I looked at the national lawmaker and said, I'm curious where you're hearing that, because I've been a parent in a lot of places in Idaho, and that hasn't been my experience. And teachers are very welcoming and loving. And his response was, oh, okay. And I was the state PTA president at the time. It's good for, like parents will take those opportunities if they have that information for them. So given to them.
Yeah, I'm just going to highlight because I think you're a genius, obviously. This bi-directional relationship building that everyone has to give and listen and work at this. And again, to improve the lives of our young people, right? So it's not.
Well, and I do want to say our PTA has been great. The parent meeting that I have every January is around this data, is hosted by PTA. And so we share this, we have conversations about this. And I do know what the questions imply, but really what we're looking at is we know kids do better when they have strong relationships with teachers. I mean, that's anecdotal, but I think that's also research based. And our data indicated, it's in that line there that only 38% of our kids indicated we recognize when they're struggling. That's a problem. And so, if we had someone who could at least recognize, maybe they're not identified as a trusted adult, but that's the work we need to do, for sure. But our PTA has been an amazing support, and the best conversations have come from those parent conversations.
Well, we kind of ended up doing a little bit of questions and recommendations all at once. I do want you to know that I have been taking notes this whole time, and I will actually get these over to you. With just the few minutes that we have left, I would like to talk about the asynchronous assignment for the cohort group. So let me just pull this up really quick. So for our cohort group, your next asynchronous assignment is to create your own school case. So if you go into our usual platform where your cohort assignments are, you will find that this school case form is linked in there. So you can get it there. You should be getting an email here in the next 15 minutes with a link to that. The case must be based on a real challenge in your school or district. We want you to work as a team and only submit one for your school. If you're an individual, every individual will submit one. After submitting, just make sure you confirm the submission on the assignment page that you guys always upload your assignments to. It's just a yes or no question. Yes, we submitted. No, we did not. Oops, sorry. Your case should briefly address the core challenge areas: student belonging, staff well-being, community engagement, mental, behavioral health. A short description of the issue. Any data, if you have data, would be great, and any steps that you've taken so far. What our panelists are going to do, so Adam and Megan are going to review these school case submissions, and they're going to choose three. Those three that they choose, we are going to give you guys a chance to present just like Julia just did. You will present to this group and we will give you guys a bunch of feedback. We imagine that there will be some overlap of kind of ideas. I know every school in Payette is in our cohort, and so we might try to figure out to present one of your schools so that hopefully we can reach a broader audience with you guys. But anyways, we really want you guys to present this. So it will be February, March, and April. We will have more of these case presentations. So that's just a quick overview of your assignment for these next 2 weeks. And again, that's due on January 23rd. You guys should be getting an email in the next 15 minutes with a direct link to that. But we are going to be back next time. First of all, I really want to thank Adam, Megan, and Julia for participating today. This is our first case for this series. Really interesting discussion. I'm loving that we're having so many viewpoints on our panel. We love having all of people from different areas. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you for participating. We're going to be back on Friday, February 13th from 10 to 11 a.m. We have our presenters, Norm Stewart, who's the superintendent of Marsing School District, who will be behind the scenes kind of helping out with this, but not there that day. And then Ann Abbott, who is with Boise State University. They'll be presenting on data-driven decision-making, specifically targeting intervention and partner selection. So hopefully giving you guys some really tangible things to do once you have your data. So we'll see you then. Again, that will be Friday, February 13th. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.